I don't know how many more times I can say welcome. Bienvenidos a todos. De nuevo, si ocupan la interpretación, vayan a mero abajo de la pantalla de Zoom. Hay un botón que dice interpretación y pueden seleccionarlo y seleccionen a español para poder escuchar esta conversación en español. If you need the Spanish interpretation, please go down to the very bottom where it says interpretation and select Spanish. My name is Leslie Priscilla. I am the founder of Latinx Parenting. I am super excited to be here. This is our third annual Brown Fatherhood series. I cannot believe it. It feels like last month, Carlos, that you were a guest on the one that we had the very first year in 2021. I had to do mental math. I had to subtract 2 from 2023. But I am so very excited to have you here as the host. I'm going to go ahead and read Carlos's bio so that you can read a little bit more about him. Throughout these conversations, you will also be learning more about Carlos. I'm so excited for y'all to hear about the work that he does as well. And so just, keep coming every week to engage in these conversations. And then I will shortly also read Erik's bio so that you can hear a little bit more about him. But really the meat of this conversation is going to be just the flow between Erik and Carlos. And so I'm going to shut up really soon. But let me go ahead and read this bio for Carlos. Juan Carlos de la Rosa is a 30-year-old single father who was born and raised in the Inland Empire. He is currently an IBEW Local 477 electrician for the County of San Bernardino. As the oldest of 3 children in his family and the son of undocumented parents, he has intentionally begun to reflect on developing his action values as a father, son, and brother. This journey he has embarked on has allowed him to take on the challenge of being in uncomfortable positions as he has questioned the notion of what it means to be a man. The struggle of taking part in intentional reflection has challenged many traits and behaviors of machismo that have been learned in his experiences with family, friends, and society at large. He has found himself now dedicated towards exploring ways of expressing his masculinity in healthier ways and breaking the generational cycles that have been perpetuated by the bind machismo has had on Latino men. Juan Carlos is also the host of the Modern Macho podcast and a very, very dear friend of mine. So welcome, Juan Carlos. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I am just real quick. I just want to say thank you to you. Thank you to the whole Latinx parenting team for trusting me with this. I'm really excited to have conversation with other men, to really be vulnerable, to drop our walls for a little bit, and hopefully give hope, I think, to men out there that are either starting on the journey, that are in the middle of it, or that are losing hope sometimes, and hopefully resonate with even anyone that's going through it, that feels like someone else is going through it, and really, like I said, kind of coming together and giving hope to everybody.
Thank you so much. And Maria, I just saw your message that the chat is disabled. I will go ahead and enable the chat shortly. I'm so sorry. I don't know why that's the default, but we'll go ahead and open the chat shortly because we do want you to be in community and be having discussions as well in the chat. Definitely be receiving the information that you're hearing from Erik and Juan Carlos, but we will be opening up the chat shortly. And then if you have any additional questions or any tech support needs, Maria is here. I will be here in the background as well. And now I would really like to introduce Erik Cardenas, our guest, our very first 2023 Brown Fatherhood Series guest. Erik, hi. I'm going to go ahead and read your bio. Erik is the son of Mexican immigrants, originally from Houston, Texas. He lives in Seattle, Washington with his wife, Lupita, and 3 amazing children, Montserrat, Santiago, and Ilan. Montserrat's birthday is today. Happy birthday, Monse. He is now the father, this is not in your bio, but he is now the father of a teenager. When not spending time with his family, Erik is working on addressing the inequities faced by the Latinx community in healthcare through the company he co-founded and leads as CEO, Zócalo Health. And so we will be dropping the links in the chat to Zócalo Health, to the Modern Macho podcast, to anything that gets referenced will be in the background so that you can make sure that you connect to those resources. And so I'm going to let y'all get started. I'm so excited to be an attendee, a participant in this, and let's get started. And I'll go ahead and enable the chat for everybody. Again, if you have any needs please drop them in the chat once it's enabled. And thank you so much to Lorena Rincon and Lorena de la Vega, who will be interpreting for us today. Okay, adelante.
Good morning. Good morning. First and foremost, if you guys do want to check out any of my stuff of what we do, I don't want to waste too much time here talking about it at The Modern Macho. You can see everything that we do there, www.themodernmacho.com. Anything from community events to posting a lot of what the men are going through, their own vulnerability, their own struggles, and sharing a lot of the information about the podcast. But today, it's about you, bro. Mr. Erik, how you doing, man?
Great, man. Thanks for having me, bro. I'm really excited to be spending some time with you today.
Love it, dude. Love it. Yeah. So, one of the things that I think we can both agree on that we were kind of discussing before getting into this was, the multiple hats that we wear, right? And as dads, as you do, like with your health stuff, things that I do with my podcast, things like that. A lot of this is shaped on our upbringing, so I kind of want to just take it back first, take it to the beginning and hear a little more about your story and in a way, the things that have programmed you in a way to how you are now. So tell us a little more about yourself. What's your upbringing been like? What were those struggles growing up now looking back, dude?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And before I get started again, similar to just some of the comments you made, I want to thank Leslie and her entire team for coordinating this. I think this is really important. Great conversations to be had here. I wish these were the resources I had 13 years ago when I started on my fatherhood journey. And I'm just really pleased and really happy and really a lot of gratitude for this space. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, also all the work that Leslie's doing. So thank you for that. So let me just kind of introduce myself, just so everyone has a little bit more context as we kind of go through the conversation today. As my intro mentioned, I'm the proud son of Mexican immigrants. My parents, Benigno and Maria Guadalupe, they moved to Houston from a small town outside of Monterrey, Nuevo León, called Cadreta in the early 70s. So I grew up in inner city Houston, lived in the hood, encountered everything, that the hood has to offer, both good and bad. I think that there's definitely a lot that's really shaped me growing up in the environment. And while there was a lot of fear at times that I had to deal with growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in, I'd say that as the youngest of three kids, I'm very fortunate that, my parents really did create a good home for us. We certainly didn't ever feel like que nos faltaba nada. We always felt like that nunca nos quedamos con las ganas de nada. We always felt that we had a good solid foundation. And part of it, I think, is because my parents, they came from very little. They knew that by leaving family behind in a life of really poverty, that they were fully committed to doing something better. And I'm sure that they didn't know what was going to happen, but in retrospect, they sacrificed a ton. And while we saw as a family our fair shares of ups and downs, they managed to achieve many things that I'm pretty sure that they didn't think were possible when they left Mexico. Not to say, though, that they didn't pass on generational trauma and some of the things that have really been ingrained in our culture. I would definitely want to unpack that as part of this conversation. But again, I want to say that I was given a good foundation. Now, my journey in particular to parenthood started with a very important relationship in my life. I met my soulmate, my partner, my wife, my freshman year in high school. My wife, Lupita, and I have been together now for more than half of our lives. She's really been my ride or die since the beginning and has put up with a lot of the craziness in my life as an entrepreneur and someone who's really been focused on my career. I've moved us around a lot and have really kind of forced her to be, deal with some uncomfortable moves and things like that. But we've been together for a long time. So we got married in 2008. We gave life to our first baby in 2010. That was my Monse, who's having a birthday today, as you mentioned. And then I have my two amazing boys who I was going to warn you, man, like at any time they might barge in here to ask if they can have a stack or something. So Santi and Elan. So Santi's is going to be 11 in February and Elan's 5. So those are my kids. The thing I'll mention about being a father, I feel like I've got a lot of great experience now. I feel like if it was a job, I'd be at the top of the pay band right now, probably doing pretty good. But the reality is that being a dad is not a job, right? I hate it when people are like, "Oh, you're gonna babysit the kids." Like, I'm not a babysitter. I don't help my wife. I'm papi. I'm papi to my kids. I'm a partner to my wife, and just like my parents, I'm trying to simply move this generation forward. I'm looking to leave this generation a little better than my generation. And I don't know if I'm gonna be successful. I don't know if I'm gonna make those improvements, but I'm certainly gonna try. And celebrating birthdays today, the one thing that's really kind of top of mind for me is that we all know as parents that the days are long, but the years are short, and time flies, and these little humans are going to be adults one day. And I just hope that when they are adults, they can reflect back on their young lives and really feel like they've been supported, respected, and loved in a way that that they deserve. So that's kind of my story. As we mentioned, I'm in healthcare. I definitely want to talk a little bit about that because there are a lot of parallels to what my career, what I'm doing impacts how I'm a dad. But that's my story, man.
Hey, man, I appreciate sharing all that. Thank you. You touched on a couple things that I think were very key, right? Which was like being a dad isn't a job. And I think we can, at least speaking for myself, I understand that now, but I think the way that I was wired, it was kind of a chore, right? Like
Yeah.
it was like I'm supposed to do this kind of thing, right? And as I've learned over the years, I was doing my best, but you could probably agree with this, dude. It's like it's the way we were wired. It's the way
Yeah.
we were kind of conditioned into believing that some of this stuff. And you brought up something else that I think is huge, man. And I give you a lot of credit for, and I hope you're proud of yourself for, was understanding that our parents did the best that they could, and also looking at them subjectively and understanding they made mistakes. And it's no longer necessarily about holding it against them. But it's now, okay, cool. I understood you did your best with what you could. How can I do my best with what I have, right? And like you said, kind of start creating that start breaking those cycles, right? I wanted to ask you, growing up, what was your relationship like with your father?
Yeah. So my family, my dad is a great man. I love my parents a ton, and I was very fortunate to have both my parents at home all the time. Right, my dad um, definitely was not the type of dad. I get triggered by a lot of these TikTok videos that I see where people are like creating content sharing like Latina mom or Latina dad, and they do these things because you do see that in our culture. You do see it like in our friends' houses. Like I remember going to a friend's house and seeing how their parents acted. I'm very fortunate that I had a really good relationship with my dad. My dad was very kind, very warm. He didn't um, he didn't demonstrate a lot of these like masculine traits. Like he some of the things I remember were like, yeah, he taught me how to like defend myself and stand up for what's right. But what the funny thing, and I don't know if this will resonate at all, but I think we broke down some of the stereotypes because like my mom and dad, they both like to cook. And just the simple idea of like not making it like the mom's job to like cook and have everything ready. Like, yeah, there was days that happened where like my mom had dinner ready and, but both my parents worked. They both got home. My mom would do this. But there were days that my dad was like, nah, like, don't worry, I got it. And that really like resonated with me as a kid and now as an adult that the responsibilities needed to be split within the parents. And I'm very fortunate to see that because I know I have a lot of friends. I even have, on my wife's side, I have brother-in-laws and stuff that think very differently. And I'm just very fortunate to have a father who was very, I want to say very fluid. And, I've got pictures of him, where he's teaching me things, we're doing like, he showed me affection, which is again, something that I think is really important. And so I had a great relationship with him. I think more so now, my dad's in his 80s. I wish, the thing that kind of took me away was my career. So I'm unlike my brother and my sister who at one point lived blocks away from my parents. I lived states away. And so if there's anything, I think I kind of created that distance. And I think it's also important because it did shape and expose me to new things as a father. Like, it really kind of broke the cycle for me. But, I think growing up, I had somebody who was always present, who was always there for me, who was really a good role model. I know we talked about like spanking and stuff like that a little bit in our car earlier this week. my mom was a spanker. My dad wasn't. My dad was never like about it. And I think that also had a lot to do with it. Like I definitely had when I had Monse, 13 years ago, we didn't really quite know. I didn't really quite know where that line was for me. But I definitely think that also knowing that my dad, I was probably in high school when he was like, I never laid a finger on me. I was like, oh shit, like that's true. You never did. So I think if anything, I learned a lot about how to discipline with like respect and with like setting expectations and like, dude, just don't do me wrong kind of thing. And it really resonated. It really did inspire a lot of who I am. And I'm still working through a lot of it. I'm still figuring a lot of it out. But I definitely have to say, man, I'm really, really blessed to have the man that's my father in my life. And he definitely played an important role.
No, I love that. I love that. And I think something very important, especially for our listeners too, is we're all so different yet parallel journeys along the way, right? Like, and I love that you acknowledge that you were very fortunate to have a lot of those things. I'm sure we have some dads out there, some Theos out there that are probably listening, or even moms that are probably listening too, that can't say the same, right? That unfortunately maybe had difficulties. I know for myself, dude, and I'll be the first to admit, Leslie know this, that I was a spanker, right? And I was I turned out okay. I turned out okay. And, as I learned over the years, it's like, yeah, you can throw someone in the water and they'll swim, but nobody ever showed me what it's like to have the patience to really teach me how to swim and at what cost, right? Like, sure, we figured it out because we did. That's what a lot of us did. And so, but at the end of the day, there's other better ways of doing it, right? And so, something that I kind of wanted to ask you was, through this journey with you having this, what sounds like a very healthy level of relationship with your father, was therapy ever like discussed? Mental health, was that a thing? Was that something that you ever pursued? I mean, what was that? What was the conversation about around mental health growing up for you?
It was non-existent. The concept of mental health growing up was like anything like the typical, right? Like if you talked about being depressed, like estás aburrido, like ponte a hacer algo, like go do something. Like if anybody talked about like even going to see like a doctor about anything mental health related, like estabas loco, like those were the stereotypes and the stigmas that unfortunately our community still faces. And it's something that I'm really passionate about trying to address. But it really wasn't. And I'll tell you, in my family, like even, I feel like we as a society, we've really done a lot. And I think we're moving forward in trying to really prioritize the role that mental health plays in our overall health. But it's still something that we're working to dismantle within our own family. I've had conversations with my parents. I think, when I was starting Zócalo Health, we started this company a little over a year ago. I had to interview people. Like one of the things that me and Marissa, my co-founder, did was we decided that we wanted to go do a lot of research and interview people. And I interviewed strangers, I interviewed family members, I interviewed my mom and dad, because we wanted to build something for our community. And I remember asking, we had like 10 or 12 questions about mental health. And I asked my dad, I was like, hey, have you ever felt anxious? Like, what is that? Like, he didn't even understand the concept of what that meant. I asked him if he ever felt depressed. He's like, and he kind of laughed at me, but I knew that it was like his defense mechanism. And it was just a very common theme in a lot of the people, especially when I interviewed some of the older generation. I had a couple deals that I interviewed, and it was kind of like a little nervous laugh, like, what? Like, yeah, no, I'm not depressed. And I'm like, bro, the way you're answering, like, let me have you talk to somebody. And we're in the process of hiring therapists at Zócalo Health to make it more accessible and more inclusive. And, I think that we could probably, start chipping away and making it something of a more normalized conversation. For me, it wasn't something that I got to really do. And it wasn't something that really was a possibility until Lupita started to bring that up. And I think as a couple, we realized the importance of needing help to unwind some of these things that, are harder to manage on our own. And that's something that, man, I hope that my kids, you know, if it's something that they want to do, that they feel comfortable doing it when they're ready and not waiting until they're 40 years old to have those conversations and trying to unwind that big ball of yarn that is our parenthood journey, you know?
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I mean, I've been guilty of that myself, just being a little more reactive than proactive with things like that, you know? How did it feel for you when your partner came and told you about therapy? Like, was that something that you were willing to listen? Did you trust her on that? Was that something that you were defensive about? What was that for you?
Well, yeah, let me back up and kind of give you a little more context as to how this even became a conversation in our
Okay.
relationship. I think this is something that will probably resonate with Leslie because I think this is where the stories sort of merge. I wouldn't be the father that I am today, or at least the father that I'm trying to be today, if it wasn't for my wife. And when we got married, my wife decided that she didn't want to have a birth in a hospital. She wanted to have a natural home birth. And that opened up, and I'll be honest, I was like, what? Why? Like, we have insurance. Like, let's go to the doctor. And it was like, no, like, I want to do this. And so while I had a little resistance at first, I felt like it really opened it up to me. And I started to realize like the business of home birth or the business of just childbirth in hospitals. I started to realize that while there's some good intentions and like the typical healthcare system and all that, I just realized that there's just alternative ways of doing things and that those things are equally as important and do matter. And a lot of them are rooted in history and in culture and in traditions. And that's when I started to really think about also like not only the home birth, but then also then like how are we going to raise our kids? You know, how was I going to approach disciplining them? And that just evolved, man. It evolved into like us, you know, co-sleeping. I remember, you know, and these are all conversations. Like imagine all these conversations having with my mom when we're like, hey, no, mom, no vamos a ir al hospital, vamos a ir con las parteras. And she looked at me like, why? Like, you don't have insurance? I'm like, we do, but like, this is the choice. And just facing that on. And so once I was in. And then that's when I started getting exposed to all these different ways of being like a good husband, of being a good father. And that's when I felt like, while maybe it wasn't super intentional at the beginning, now we're a little bit more intentional about just the approach. And I think that plays a big role in how we have shaped into parents this last decade. Because it's tough, man. Like, and even then, there's times where it's like really challenged me because my Monse was a good kid, like never really had any like behavior issues. But then I had my Santi, and he really challenged us in a very different way. And there were times where I was like, no, the only way to fix this is by spanking him. Like, I mean, you know, I gotta do this. And dude, like the guilt and the things that I felt, the first time I felt that way, I realized, man, like that's not okay. And then like that epiphany, like, I don't know if it's an epiphany, but that like realization that you have when, like, I remember the first time I was like trying to deal with the fact that I was upset. And I just talked to, he was old enough, and I just talked to him and I was like, dude, I'm upset right now. I can't help you with your thing right now. Like, I got to go fix me right now. And the fact that he like listened and like we took our space and then we came back and we respected each other. And then we kind of like, I was able to address his needs at that point in time. Like, dang, like this works. I can't believe that like the first like reaction is to like spank a kid when like, you know, sometimes just being a communicator can really help. And so anyway, all that to say, man, like it all started with my wife and that decision. And it has inspired us to do so many things that in our family, people are like, why? Like, you sleep with the baby? Like, what do you mean? And we're like, yeah, like, you know, and those are things that were like decisions that we made, but man, like they really influenced who I am today. So I'm sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there, but
No,
you
dude,
know,
don't ever, no, man,
figured, but I
nothing
just
but
want
pleasure. Bro, I tell you what, because that's huge. And, you know, let's get some smiley faces in the chat because this is huge. Like the vulnerability that's happening right now, bro. Like, I appreciate you sharing that so much because you know what? you bring up something great, which is like symptoms and diseases, right? And I think the symptom was the spanking, right? And it's so unfortunate because our kids are the ones that are kind of getting the short end of the stick here. But at the same time, like the disease is the empathy for yourself, the love that you need to give yourself, like you having to really process and understand. And it's like the sooner we do it, the better. I remember the first time, dude, I told my son to take a shower that like he threw a tantrum that was like bad. But I finally realized like I'm going to bed feeling guilty for what I did. And if I
Yeah.
really am doing something good for my kid, why do I feel like shit?
Yeah.
And why is it
Yeah.
that I'm only if spanking is supposed to be good for my kid, right? Like this is supposed to teach him discipline. Why ain't I ever doing it when I'm in a good mood?
Yep.
Like why is it that when I'm happy, when I'm chill, when I just have all the patience in the world, why don't I do it then? And I'll never
Yeah.
forget, dude, the very first time he threw a tantrum when he was gonna get in the shower, and like I literally had one hand around him, just like hugging him and like validating him and telling him like, I know you don't want to shower, like I know, but like we're dirty, we're gonna have to, right? Like letting him process his feelings as I was learning that it was okay for me to process mine, even as a grown ass adult. And dude, my other hand was like
Yeah.
wrapped on the towel, like in the bathroom, just like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Like I did not
Yeah.
have
Absolutely.
I was ready, but I also was like, this is gonna take a long time. And I think even now, bro, I'm pretty sure you probably have moments still where it's just like, and I love what you brought up, which is it's not selfish that just like we're giving them their space, like, yo, sometimes we need our space. You know what I mean? Like we gotta
Yeah.
honor each other. And I think boundaries is key with that, right? Like it's not fully in, fully out, but sometimes it's like, hey, I'm gonna respect you. If anything, you know what I think is dope now, bro, that you're doing? And I'm gonna give you a bunch of flowers right now, is the fact that you're allowing your children to process whatever the heck they need to process. Because here we are as
Mhm.
grown ass dudes, and we're like, I feel like I'm still practicing how to do that sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%. And I think what's clear is like, look, we have the intention and we have to give ourselves the space to execute on the intention, but we also have to be comfortable with the fact that we're not perfect. And for every tantrum that we have, if there's 4 that happen today and 2 that happen tomorrow, we have to be happy with the wins. And then we have to know that sometimes like it's hard. Like sometimes it's hard to meet them at every single point. And I don't think that we should be discouraged as dads to say like, dang, like I messed up. Cool, like internalize it, reflect and just be prepared. And there's times where I go to the beat, I'm like, man, like I could have handled that a little better. And we'll talk about it. And I feel like, okay, we learned and I'm gonna try to do a little bit better. Like there's not perfection. There's like nobody's perfect. But I also want to just highlight that like, we're just trying to do a little better every day and be okay with sometimes like, hey, we missed it. We had left some opportunities on the table. Like let's figure it out and let's do better tomorrow. And I also want to highlight the importance of just communicating, man. It doesn't matter how young they are or how old they are. Kids listen, and sometimes they can't use their words. Like they have big feelings, they can't use their words. But man, I feel like just by talking to them and letting them know, and I think there's a lot there. And I feel like my kids in particular, when I share with them, hey, like yesterday, let's talk about that for a second. It's never about the guilt. It's just like, hey, let's just talk about how we felt. And maybe, I usually use that as an opportunity to say, hey, like daddy could have done this or that. And I feel like we do better. And I think we continue to build trust in each other. I was listening to something the other day where, especially with my kids that are getting older now, I start wondering like, man, what kind of kids are they going to, because I can tell you, man, when I was a teenager, I was crazy, dude. Like I was, taking the car, doing all this stuff. And kids have changed a lot. I don't see them doing the same things, but still I'm like, man, are my kids going to be like, when they get in trouble, are they going to be like, shit, I'm not going to call my dad. He's going to be so pissed. Or are they going to be like, damn, I'm going to call my dad because he's going to help me. And my hope is that it's the latter because of the trust building that we're having now, because that I'll respect what happened. Yeah, there's always going to be a consequence in some way. Like sometimes the consequences is apparent to them based on the thing that they do. It doesn't always have to come from me. But, that's the thing that I was like, dang, like I hope my kids are going to trust me or repeat that enough to be like, I got to call my mom or I got to call my dad and he's going to come help me instead of being scared. And that's one thing that really makes me think about like how we interact, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Hey, dude, that's huge, man. Thank you. There's And you know, I think about that sometimes myself. Like, if my son comes at me and is honest with me about a mistake he did, on one hand, I'm like, I don't want to let it slide and not do anything about it. But then on the other hand, is like, if I give him shit, he's gonna eventually stop telling me, right? Like that was kind of like the pickle that I was in. And you brought up something very important, was the difference between discipline and punishment, right? Because I could still hold my child accountable, right? And come
Yeah,
from a place of love and be like, hey, no, you know what? You decided to make a mess. I understand, that's okay, but I think it's time that we go ahead and start cleaning this stuff up. I'm not upset that you made a mess, but let's clean it, right? Which is really the discipline. Like, if we talk about being conscious parents, that's what we can give to our kids when we're not around, right? Because, giving them the punishment is like, okay, cool. I understand that if I drop this, I'm going to be hit. But in all reality, you talk about giving them a tools for when they grow up. We're not giving them anything, and I want to be clear about something. And I love that you brought this up too, is like, there's no shame here, bro. There's no shame, because
yeah,
I've already said it. Like, I used to spank my son, but it was because it's what we knew. And that's part of what this whole individual journey has allowed us as parents now to see. That brings me kind of to my next question, which is, how important and how is it that you are able to disconnect your upbringing from what is best for your children?
that's a tough one. I don't know that I have a real good answer, to be honest. I think part of it, looking like taking a step back, one of the parts that sucks here is like I had to do what my parents did. My parents had to leave the clan, the family, to go do something better for their family. And it was all for the good of the family. My mom continued to send money back to Mexico, helped out the family, especially when my grandparents got sick. Felt like it was necessary. And as I mentioned earlier, I had my brother and my sister lived blocks away from my mom's house. So that meant that they got to go, my mom dropped off tacos in the morning. They got to have dinner with my parents. That's something that I missed out in. So after high school, I was the first to get into a major university, first to get kicked out. And I was still like wanted to pursue the grind. I wanted to do something. I didn't want to work at Exxon in the refineries with my brother at the time. So I want to go do something. I got into healthcare and built my career. But that career took me away. I moved to Wisconsin. I didn't even know how Wisconsin was on the map. But I got a job, and then I was really inspired by the things that my parents said, which was like, "Hey, bust your ass, take care of your family, and like you'll be all right." And that was incomplete advice, by the way, but I took that and I wanted to like, all right, cool. I got another job offer. I'm going to move over here. And so we moved around. And I think that is what sort of disconnected me from seeing the things that were close to me, like whether it was my family, I live in Seattle, man. Like I can't find somebody in my neighborhood I could talk to and share this with, because I don't, I went from a Latino neighborhood to a mixed neighborhood where it's not the same. And so I feel like I got disconnected that way. Like the geography played a role.
Yeah.
And then the fact that, we built our family kind of independently. And so it does hurt me that I don't get to be home and spend time with my family. But we also got to build our own little island here. Me and Lupita with our kids. And we got to raise them the way that we wanted to, without a lot of interference and a lot of influence. Like we got to do that. And I think that really helped us a lot. Again, there's a lot of trade-offs that happen there, but I think it definitely set us up to be able to do that. That's where I feel like we got to disconnect and really kind of own sort of the narrative for our kids. And again, don't get me wrong, like my kids are like, "Dang, when are we gonna go see Wela and Welo?" And we try to make that, we fly my parents up here as much as we can, so that they can have that connection and have that family feel. But it's pretty ironic for me, because it kind of goes full circle. Like my parents left, I left. And while I look at how their journey ended up, I hope that my journey in retrospect is the same, and that we feel like, yeah, we did do better, and my kids are better for it.
Right. No, I love that. I love that. And you said this earlier, like at the end of the day, we're not shooting for perfection, but it's like we're getting the ball rolling, bro. Snowball effect. And I think we can both agree that parenting is the key to everything, bro. Like really creating change, really creating a loving space where even people with different ideas can come together. and really, like, dude, these kids are our future, man. Kids are everything. And the more we empower them, the more confidence we give them. I think a lot of times, parents out of fear, and I get it. This was my parents, is like, they tried to be the adversity to prepare me for the world, when in reality, bro, all we needed was the safe space, and I feel like that's something that
Yeah.
we can agree that you and I are trying to do, which is, at the end of the day, the world's going to do whatever the heck it needs to do with them. So I want to make sure that I'm there for my child. And that means that I will hold him
Yeah.
accountable, and that there will be discipline, um, but he knows that at the end of the day, like, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think that's where a lot of our brothers got lost, man, because as the intention was good from our parents, we found where we were accepted and where we were loved, and we've lost brothers along the way because of this.
Yeah.
um I want
I
to
think
I want
I
to
agree.
be yeah, we want to be conscious of the time, and I do want to talk a little bit about health, and specifically, not only the work that you do, bro, but let's be real, like, men don't go to the doctor. We don't, like, I don't need to go to the doctor type stuff. So what's that challenge look like for you, trying to get us as a community of men to understand, like, if we want to take care of
Yeah.
our families, as like it's crazy. We say we'll die for our kids, we'll do anything for our families, right? But it's like, but we won't live, we won't go to therapy, we won't. And it's so valid, right? Like I said, it's valid. But what's that challenge for you, really trying to help and and really create that space for men to understand that it's important for them to take care of their health?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier, my parents said, my dad in particular would say, look, just take care of your family, and provide for them, like, work hard, like, bust your ass and work hard. And that's all you got to do as a man. Like, that's all you got to do for your family. I was like, man, that's great advice, but I mentioned it was incomplete. Like, and to keep it really simple, I think there's a lot of things that obviously I would give my sons and my daughter advice that would be a little different. But in this conversation, I would say that the one thing my dad failed to say is that if I didn't take care of my health, I couldn't do any of that.
Yeah.
And I think the idea is that if you don't fill your cup first, you can't fill up anybody else's cup, right? So, like, it's important that we take care of ourselves, otherwise, and especially for some of the dads out there where they're the sole source of income. Like, man, it's easy to do, like, work overtime when you're in your 20s and 30s. But man, by the time you get to your 40s, like, stuff starts to hurt. Blood pressure starts to, like, all these things that we are predisposed to genetically start to really play a role in our health. And so what we've done here is I've been in healthcare for a long time, man, 20 some odd years. I worked for some large health systems, and then been an entrepreneur for the last 10 years, helped build some pretty successful companies, got to work at Amazon. But I left Amazon, a really comfortable job, to build Zócalo Health, which was primarily intended to provide a much improved experience when it comes to healthcare, specifically primary care, which is kind of like the bedrock of the healthcare system. That's what really will get us to better health as individuals and as a community. We built it with the intention of improving that experience for the Latino community. I think for a lot of us, we're sort of been left to fend for ourselves and depend on safety net services, which are still very important, very critical in our community. But none of them are incentivized to really improve the overall experience, and none of them take into account our culture and the role that things like feminismo and fatalism play in how we approach healthcare. Not to mention the fact that there's a lot of social determinants that really impact our health. I have patients that come to us today that are happy that we can connect them with a Latina physician today or tomorrow, same day, next day, but then they can't afford to pick up the medication. And so then we connect them with a promotor de salud who's on our team, who connects them and says, hey, look, we can help you find that medication a lot cheaper. We can have it delivered to your house. And we're just addressing a lot of the pain points in the healthcare system. I think in regards to this conversation, the thing that I want to bring up here is that, one of the things that I have to deal with a lot at work is convincing people that, there's this idea of fatalism, that our health is predetermined. My mom was like, si Dios quiere, well, no, pues Diosito sabe, this and that. And I'm like, no, this disease, this chronic condition is reversible. And you don't have to suffer because of it. You don't have to, like, shorten your life because of it. Like, it is reversible. And we just have to help people understand that. And it takes time. It takes building trust. It takes building relationships. And that's the thing that we're trying to do different. And it's something that is a real constant struggle, especially with men, because we're like, man, I'm fine. Like, we're good. Don't worry about it. But it's so important, because if we don't get checked out, if we don't have conversation, we don't build relationships, like, we can't address these things that are in our body and may not manifest for years. And then it's too late. And then it's much more difficult to reverse. And so if we can just get people connected to a doctor and start building those relationships, and it's not just with the doctor, it's with like nutritionists, it's with a therapist, all of that's part of our health. And you shouldn't have to go searching for that in different places, trying to figure out how to pay for it. We're trying to help people navigate that. And so how this ties back to being a dad is that I think the thing here, when I talk about, you know, these things being reversible, that we can heal. Sometimes we need a little help, but we can heal. And just like our health isn't predetermined, who we are as a father isn't predetermined. We can change all of that today. And the thing is that whether it's a relationship with a physician, a therapist, or with an hermano like you, helping create this space, like, we can heal and we can reverse these things, and we can have these conversations in open and feel like we can be better ourselves. Because if we are our best selves, then we can be our best selves for our family, for our spouses, for our kids, for our community. And that's what I'm trying to change. I'm trying to change that. And, you know, again, I want to highlight that, like, when I built Zócalo Health, it's not just to be like, oh, it's a place to go to the doctor, but I want to create that space that if somebody wants to come in and talk about fatherhood and talk about corporal punishment, talk about whatever it is, like, I want there to be a space for our community to be able to talk about these things full, like, in the open, vulnerabilities and everything out there, because we need more of that.
Yeah, I love mic drop, bro. I don't even know what to say after that, dude. I mean, I'll tell you what, I think what you're doing is incredible. I think it's going to be extremely successful. I'm manifesting that now, and I don't think it's because what you're doing. I think it's because of why you're doing it. I think your heart's in a great place, and I love that. I think the community's lucky to have you. I'm glad that we've been connected through Leslie on all of this, because it's important stuff, you know. And like you said, it takes practice. I think it's being able to have an open heart like that, man, is a lot of inner work, and it starts there, right? Building a solid foundation for yourself. And it's tough. It's tough. Like, it's hard to see, you know. I mean, as I said before, it wasn't long ago that I was just self-sabotaging because I was making mistakes and felt like this was, you know, I mean, I have a construction background, bro. I'm surrounded by men that we all just, it's like we're all hiding behind this mask saying that, like, we're fine, we're fine, we're fine. And so that's why I think I have so much love for that, because I'm like, I get it. Like, boys, I get it.
Yeah.
And you bring up something so important, which is like, you might not resonate with my story. You might not resonate with Erik's story, but at the very least, we're all on a similar struggle. And the fact that you're able to provide, you know, resources, whether it's, like you said, whether it's the therapy, whether it's the medication, whatever it might be, for our brothers to help themselves, you know, to me is like, that's key, because everyone is so different, right? Like our children. So I think that's awesome. I want to thank you, bro. I want to thank you for everything you shared, for everything you've shared about your story, about the work that you do. I want to thank once again Leslie, being conscious here of the time. I want to allow her back in and go ahead and give the floor back over to her, man.
Thank you.
Wow. I don't know how many times I wrote wow in the chat. I was just like, wow, wow, wow. Mind is blown. Heart is so open and so grateful. We had a lot of people engaging in the chat. There are some folks that were commenting and participating in the chat that were only sending your messages to the host and the panelists. And so I was able to see everything, but not everybody. So just double check if you're still participating in the chat, that when you are typing, that it says to everyone and not just to host and panelists. Also, just want to remind y'all that this is the very first of 3 conversations that we're going to be having virtually. And then also, if you want to share about the Brown Fatherhood series, please take a screenshot, take a picture of this conversation and then share it on IG so that people can learn about it. There are really good questions that have come in. I don't know if we're going to have time to answer every single question in as much detail as every question deserves. However, what we did last time was we took some of the questions that went unanswered and we asked the panelists and the guests to answer those questions on Instagram. And so that might be an option here if we don't get to all of the questions. And so I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Q&A box. I'm going to ask a question from Moises, who says, I'm a full-time grad student. My wife works full-time. I have more time to spend with my 1-year-old son, which is a blessing many don't have. And I can sense that my wife feels a certain type of way, which is valid. How do I mitigate the role as partner and father and help her without being toxic to myself? Like sometimes I don't feel like I'm doing enough as a father compared to the stereotypical image of Latinos. There's the trope of a father working all day and the mother spending time with the children. The role reversal for us is confusing when she's the one missing milestones. Do you have any thoughts? And I would think that this is for probably both of you.
You want to start?
Oh man. Well, first off, I mean, yeah, that's definitely got to be frustrating. That's got to be difficult to navigate. I think the self-sabotaging there probably doesn't help. I mean, I would start off by saying again, like, give yourself flowers. I think the fact that you're asking these questions means you care a lot about, being a dad, and I think that that's very important. Give yourself grace, be nice to yourself for those things. I mean, reading. I think reading has helped me a lot. I think it's very important. The Four Agreements was a very good book for me to start. That kind of just really simplified things for me. Validating your partner, I think, is going to be key. Like you said, yeah, I mean, I would start there. I would start there, really validating, giving yourself grace, being nice to yourself, knowing that you're carrying a lot of weight because you're essentially thinking you have to do what has been predetermined for you as a parent, and the reality is it's not. So I think as long as that communication is strong between you and your partner, Erik, being the mayor guy, man, help me out. Maybe you have some good insight here for me.
I think communication is key. I think I would break this down into like 2 or 3 parts. One, you're carrying a load that is not your load to carry. Let it go. Number 2, communicate. I think as long as you approach everything with love and grace, I think you all can agree on what it is for you to both be parents to your child. And I think the third piece is, try to ignore the noise. And I think that's oftentimes where we tend to try to, fit a mold. I have 3 kids. We've had to be very different parents to all 3. And so just know that there's no script. There's no predetermined role, as I mentioned earlier. Keeping in mind with that theme, unload, communicate, and define who you need to be with your spouse or your partner for your baby. You're doing a great job, by the way. I would say, just keep that in mind.
Wonderful. Yes, I love all of that. That was very full circle of a response, starting with Juan Carlos's and ending with yours, and just affirming to everybody that they're doing great just by being here, right? Just by showing up. I love what Efren Reyes, the founder of the Latino Dads Network, says. The tagline is like, just show up, compadre. And he talked about this in the last panel. And so it is just about showing up and being willing to do the work. I have another question in here from Robert Hicks, who says, I'm a stepfather, but I don't use that term. But my question is, does anyone have any tips and tricks? I'm not sure if I understand that question, because I think it just depends on tips and tricks for what. Maybe for stepfathering. I follow the mother's lead with everything, but I feel like I'm still not enough. And so I feel like what I'm hearing is like a sense of inadequacy with being a stepfather, right? And so I think because there's also people that are coming in, not just as fathers and stepfathers, but as tíos, maybe as older brothers, maybe as teachers, youth leaders, right? This series is not just for, biological fathers. It's also for people who occupy that father role. And so maybe just some words that each of you might want to say to people who are either in the stepfather role or in like a surrogate father role.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I'm not a stepfather. However, my son, as he says, has 2 dads, and that was very difficult for me to hear when I first heard it, because he's like, and originally I'm thinking like, what the F? No, you have one dad, right? And so, but realizing it was what was best for my son. So I think, again, like I said in the beginning, the fact that you're asking these questions feeling like you're not doing enough says that you care a lot about being there for the child. And so I don't think you should take a lot of this stuff personally. Um, I think being a stepfather can be just as important. And more importantly, communicating it. I don't think it's necessarily about you being able to solve the problems, but talking about that, and saying, hey, I feel like I'm not a part of this, I'm not a part of that. And what I've learned is sometimes just communicating where we're at, being validated for that sometimes can change at least what we think moving forward, or whether it gives us clarity, or we just wanted to be heard. We wanted to know that we were validated on our concerns, and we left it at that. So that would be my suggestion to you.
Yeah. Anything to add, Erik?
No, I think I'm pretty aligned with that. And then, yeah, I'm aligned there.
Beautiful. Okay. So next question is from Elizabeth Machado. In a culture that is so community-based, sorry, I skipped a question, but it's okay. We'll finish this one up. In a culture that is community-based, sometimes taking a step away to find your own way is so challenging. What kind of boundaries would you recommend to help balance maintaining connection to the community while creating that space to grow? So I think what the question also is like, how do you build a bridge between your individualism and your right to safety, autonomy, your own interests, your own path, and staying with collectivist values, which our Latinx community is so good at?
That is a great question. And I will definitely speak a little bit about that. I think having empathy for others makes it difficult. I mean, going through, I literally the last 4 months, I decided to just step away from this whole platform, because I realized I had to listen to my mind. I had to listen to my heart. And at the end of the day, as much as I want to help people, I mean, the world kind of goes on. And I don't say that to say that none of us are special, but I think it's important, again, practicing what we preach, right? And if you really want to be there for others, really understanding like, where does that come from? So, I mean, my suggestion would be, hey, if you need to shut that screen off for a week, a month, 6 months, do it. This month for me has been a lot of rebuilding, and I feel so motivated to come back, and I'm glad. I really am glad. It was the first 3 weeks of not being there. I feel really guilty because I felt like they need me. My community needs me. I need to be there for other men. I need to be there for other men. And getting over that hump, I now realize that was probably the best thing I could have done for myself. So my suggestion would be, if you're fighting it, go for it. Go for it. Do it. Take that time that you need. Process it. Write that stuff down that you're feeling, and I'm sure it's going to be temporary, and you'll come back stronger than ever.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Next question from Andrea. Amazing that you both recognize that hitting isn't good and are in touch with your feelings. It didn't feel good to hit. How do I get my first generation Latino husband on that same page? He says positive parenting is white people stuff, and I'm making our son soft. Oh, I have it. Like, this is a question I've gotten 1.5 million times. I am going to let these gentlemen answer, because I think that you all know the challenges, a little bit closer than I know the challenges, the resistance. I heard Juan Carlos speaking about the shift, right? That there was a shift that was made. And so I think a lot of people would really benefit from hearing what are some ways to encourage that shift to happen, right? And I have my responses, obviously, and I always will recommend, like, go and watch the Ending Chancla Culture Workshop, which is available, and really understand the history and like what some of the values are that we're trying to preserve by believing in things like corporal punishment. And so there's a lot more information that can be covered there, but I would love to hear Juan Carlos and Erik's response to encouraging other dads to make that shift away from violence.
Mr. Erik, go ahead, my guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think this platform exists for that very reason. I would say, if you're here, find ways to get him connected and plugged in, because there are going to be really good resources here to start to chip away at that mindset. And I think it's not something that's a switch that gets flipped. It's something that has to be deconstructed. And I think there's a variety of different ways in which this can be done. I think that that's my first piece of advice. From my experience, though, is that, trying to go back to those days when I felt like that was part of who I needed to be as a dad. Look, I'll tell you right now, hearing a kid cry because of pain that you inflicted broke me, right? And all I can share with you right now, and what I hope that he'll hear in some way, is that what we've been able to see, how we've seen our kids grow and thrive, knowing that that isn't a part of their discipline in their life anymore, is just so eye-opening. I think, especially with my middle son, Santi, he's developed into such an amazing young man, because I think he would, if I wouldn't have changed, he would have been spanked a lot. And I think that that would have definitely 100% caused a lot of problems and a lot of trauma and a lot of, and we would not have seen, like, he wouldn't have gotten, like, he wouldn't have, it was just not the right thing. And so I just, there's plenty of proof points. There's plenty of people to talk to. I would strongly urge you to try to connect him. And I think we talked about disconnecting in the previous question. Like, sometimes you just have to, like, disconnect from the people that are continuously telling you that that's the way it has to be. And if there's a way to do that, great. But I would strongly urge you and encourage you to have him be a part of this group, and work towards getting to that end result.
Yeah. And I would also recommend just like a lot of compassion, right? Like a lot of empathy for, because, and I truly believe this, and I've shared this on Instagram before, it's like how you feel about children. And if you feel like they deserve violence, that means that you feel like you deserve violence as a child.
Yeah.
And you feel
100%.
like you deserve the spankings or the beatings. And I'm writing a book, and I start off the book talking about this conversation I had with a señor, where he was like, a mí me dieron, bien recio, pero yo me lo merecía. And the rest of the class is nodding, and everyone's just sitting there like, yeah, we deserve violence. I'm like, wow, like, one individual says they deserve violence, the rest of the group is nodding that they deserve violence. What does this mean about our culture and our communities, that we feel like we deserve violence? What do we feel like we deserve? So the oppression oftentimes is not even like, I want to externalize, this rage or this anger towards my child. It's that I don't know what to do with all of this internalized rage. I don't know what to do with all this internalized oppression that I'm feeling about myself, my worth, my value, my sacredness, right? And so I would really recommend that yes, surround yourself with other community members who are doing things a little bit differently. Also have a lot of compassion for that little boy that still lives in him, that feels like he deserves violence. And so, and I'm not saying you have to accept, that he's going to spank. Those are limits. Those are agreements that you make with your partner. And we talk more about this in the Decolonized Nonviolent Parenting series. And so if you're interested in that, I'm going to ask my team to drop the link for that as well. These are conversations that are that have to happen beyond just the hour that we have. But I really just encourage everybody to recognize that whatever, feelings or expressions that our men in our communities have about children or about their women, like, it's because there's a deep level of hurt and pain and woundedness, because what happened to the men in our history was devastating and tragic and awful. And so we have 500 years of undoing to do. It may not happen, I feel like those of us who kind of were like sprinkled with some like wisdom or just the ability, the privilege of self-reflection, are very fortunate, but not everybody's there yet. And I've had to kind of release myself from trying to save everybody and be like, no, you have to understand, not everybody's there yet, but I also have to hold this vision for the fact that we can all get there.
Yeah, I wanted to say two things real quick. And one was just like, I've been guilty of that too. And I think I've called myself out on like that being very like ego based, right? Like feeling like I had to fix people, and understanding that really my mission is just to have the door open for those that are willing to come inside, right? Like my door is open for anybody that really wants the help. But what I really wanted to touch on real quick was just to kind of to put into perspective. You mentioned the little boy, and it's like it can also be very triggering to be as myself, right? To be a man that's in a position that is being told that you're hitting a child, that is essentially being required to have empathy and love for someone else, without understanding that the little boy in them is not getting it, right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not I guess just to put into perspective, like, because that's what I was, and people were telling me when I had an ex-girlfriend that said go to therapy, I thought, why are you pushing me away? Like, how dare you tell me to go to a therapist if this is what you're here for? And even the privilege behind that, right? But like, I look back now and I think that was so triggering for me, because it's like no one wants to listen to me, but somehow I have to be a good dad. I have to stop spanking. I have to stop being aggressive. So not necessarily giving an answer, but just bringing a little bit of awareness to like, that's kind of what we're having to deal with. So I really do send a lot of love to my guy here, and hopefully he feels validated in knowing that this stuff does feel kind of white and maybe, just different. I get that. I was there. And so, yeah, man, nothing but love for him, and whatever I can do. I'm sure Erik, same thing. Like, the spaces are here to talk about it. There's no shame. As long as it's an intentional conversation for the sake of getting better, bro, I'm all ears. I'm all
Yeah.
ears.
Yeah, I think the history, like, I'm like, if you understand the history of child rearing in Europe in pre-colonial times, and you understand how a lot of that authoritarianism and that oppression towards children and the dehumanization of children was brought onto this land, then it's not a white people thing. It's something that actually Europeans disconnected us from. And so for me, this is a reclamation, right? Decolonization, liberation. This is a reclamation of things that we might have had access to had that not been taken from us so violently. And so, oh my gosh, I'm like, now I'm heated and it's already past 11. But anyway, I'm going to copy and paste the rest of these questions into a Google Doc. I would love, love, love to be able to continue this conversation either on an IG Live or on stories or whatever it is that we can do to get these questions answered. I would love to just offer the space for Erik to share any final words, and Juan Carlos to share any final words that you have to this community that has been so engaged, that has been so willing to participate and so active in the chat. I love seeing this. People were just like vibing. And so I'm so excited to have been a part of it. I just feel so grateful and so appreciative of the both of you and of this community here at Latinx Parenting, of my team, of the interpreters. Everyone is just killing it and I'm loving it. So any final words, Erik, Juan Carlos?
I'll just say thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I'll be brief. I just want to say thank you again to both of you for this space. I want to leave. I know that it's been in the chat. Just want to highlight that I'm accessible on social. Please connect with me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Always here to try to build community with anyone who needs it. I know I need it. And then also, please feel free to give us a try at Zócalo Health if you're in Texas or in California. We are offering access, complimentary access for the next 3 months. It doesn't matter if you're documented, undocumented, insured, uninsured. We're here for the community to try to help us really take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. So please, it would be an honor to have you all try the service. This goes to anyone also on the Latinx parenting staff, God bless anyone in your families, share it far and wide. It would really help us tremendously. So thank you very much again for having us. I'm so honored for the time and the space.
Yes, Erik, you're amazing. Seeing Juan Carlos, homeboy, compa.
That's it, man. No, like I told you, Erik, thank you again for your time, man. All this aside, whatever I can do to help, that I'm here. Once, like I said, check us out on Spotify, The Modern Macho. There's a lot of episodes going in there, a lot of different topics that we tackle. And as I always say, I want to be very clear. I'm not a professional. I'm just a dude on a journey. My best friend joins me on the podcast, and that's really all this is. And as Erik has mentioned, these resources are there, and I think it's just as important for us as men to start talking about this stuff and really resonating with each other. So at the very least, we know we're not alone, even if you don't resonate with the story itself. So I see Chelly here asking the question. It's The Modern Macho. We also have the Instagram at The Modern Macho. Leslie, thank you again. Erik, thank you again. I'm looking forward to chatting some more with you guys and doing this again next week.
Yes, absolutely. We will see everybody next week. You will all receive a post-event email right after that. Well, maybe not right after this, but later today. And it will have some quotes that were said that were really powerful. It will have also some resources that were mentioned. Somebody had asked for book recommendations. We are in the process of compiling that. We also have a bookshop on Latinx Parenting. If you go to latinxparenting.org and you go to resources, you'll see our bookshop and you can browse some of the books that have been helpful to me and that I've heard other compadres, other dads referencing as well. One of them I do want to mention for dads specifically and men is called The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. And so I really, really recommend that everybody check that book out. It might be at your library, support your local library. But besides that, thank you again to my team. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our hosts. And we will see each other next week.
Thank you again.
All right. Bye, everybody.